In our last episode, the Janissaries were annihilated in the auspicious incident. The barracks burned, the corpses piled, and with them fell a centuries-old institution that had guarded, shackled, and finally betrayed the empire. For the first time in living memory, a sultan ruled without the shadow of the Janissaries. Mahmud II had severed the past. Now he would try to build the future. This is road to destruction, the world wars. Victory brought no peace. The empire was in ruins, the Greek rebellion still raged, provinces simmered, and the treasury bled. Across Europe, the courts of London, Paris, and St. Petersburg had watched the purge of the Janissaries with satisfaction, one more proof that the Ottomans were a state forever tearing at themselves. Yet Europe's very contempt also offered Mahmud his only path forward. If the empire was to survive in a world dominated by European arms and navies, then it had to learn from them. The new army came first. Drilled on European lines, clad in uniforms of wool and brass, its officers trained not in the traditions of the Janissary barracks, but in the methods of France and Prussia. Conscription spread into the provinces, pulling peasants into a machine that was no longer a guild but a state institution. For the first time in centuries, the Sultan commanded soldiers who were loyal to him alone. A new bureaucracy, staffed by loyal officials and educated men, began to take shape, bound not to the old orders of Sipahis and Janissaries, but directly to the palace. But Mahmud knew symbols were as powerful as cannon. He set the example in his own body. He shaved his beard, cut his hair in the European style, and ordered portraits of himself in Western uniforms sent across the empire. In his palace, robes of silk and turbans of ceremony were burned, a bonfire of the old order, replaced with frock coats, epaulettes, and the red felt fez. The fez, he declared, would be the badge of the new Ottoman. Simple, modern, universal. He patrolled the streets of Istanbul in disguise, stopping officials who refused to wear it, sometimes tearing the turban from their heads in fury. No reform was too small to enforce personally, no symbol of tradition too sacred to challenge. The changes spread outward, schools teaching modern sciences, new ministries run by salaried bureaucrats, oil paintings replacing the miniatures of old, European clocks ticking in the palace halls, orchestras playing music once condemned as foreign. Mahmud wanted not only a new army, but a new Ottoman soul, but not all souls could be remade. In the Balkans, revolts flared. In Anatolia, tribes resisted conscription and new taxes. Clerics muttered that the fez was an infidel's hat, that the Sultan was tearing at the fabric of Islam itself. Each decree revealed the paradox of his reign. Every reform was necessary, and every reform was seen as betrayal. Even as Mahmud pressed his changes, the wars of the empire dragged on. In Greece, the empire's weakness abroad grew more visible. In 1827, at Navarino, the combined fleets of Britain, France, and Russia annihilated the Ottoman Egyptian navy in a single afternoon. The catastrophe was more than a lost fleet. It was a revelation. The empire could be humbled utterly because Europe's navies willed it so. The Aegean burned again, and with it the last hope of crushing the Greek revolt. By 1830, the struggle was over. Greece was lost. Not to the rebels alone, but to the fleets and diplomats of Europe, who had willed an ancient nation back into existence. A province had broken away not through Ottoman weakness alone, but because the great powers had decided it would be so. Even the sacrifices of Mehmed Ali's Egyptian armies had not saved the empire, and their failure planted the seeds of a new quarrel between master and vassal, sultan and pasha. Mahmud's new order had survived, a rival more dangerous than any rebel province. Under Mehmed Ali, Egypt had its own modern army, its own ambitions and its own grievances. The very ally that had rescued the empire might soon test its strength against it, and yet the empire did not fall. Not yet. Mahmud's reforms, his new army, his new order, gave Istanbul a thin shield against the chaos that threatened to consume it. Mahmud had broken the Janissaries, reshaped the army, and remade the empire's face in his own image. He had shown that survival meant transformation, ruthless, relentless transformation. But Europe was circling closer, and the shadow of Egypt was growing longer. The Ottoman Empire was being reborn, yet every birth comes with blood. The empire had lost Greece not on the battlefield, but at the hands of Europe's fleets and chancelleries. Now, as Mahmud looked south, he faced an even greater danger. In our next episode, The Price of Reform, Egypt will rise. The empire will face a challenge not from the west, but from within its own house. Mehmed Ali's armies will march, and a sultan will call on Europe to save him. Yet every plea for rescue will come with a price that will bind the empire tighter to the very powers circling for its inheritance. This is Road to Destruction, the World Wars.